Yeah, so firstly, thank you, Beth, for joining us today. Um, we're Vickerstock Recruitment, so we are a specialist recruitment agency here in Northern Ireland. So we specialise in engineering, construction, health and safety, food manufacturing, professional services. The list goes on. But with this week being international, well, yesterday was International Women in Engineering Day, but you were out in the track yesterday, which I would love to hear more about. So we were delighted that you were able to join us today and have a chat. And well, I'm joined today by our specialist recruitment engineering consultants here at Vickerstock, Kelly, Jamie, and Warren. So they're also very excited to meet you and ask questions. So I suppose I'd probably like to kick off with Kelly.
Hi Beth, thanks for your time today. Are you racing this weekend? Is that why you were practicing, or?
No, we raced last weekend and we have one coming up the first weekend of July. And so this was actually a test day yesterday at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And the rules in IndyCar are such that you are allowed test days, but not at tracks where you're going to race. Okay. So you could go after the teams have been there, but we are doing a partial season this year with Simona Di Silvestro, who I have gotten back into IndyCar, which fans are very happy about because she's a fan favorite. But to put it in perspective, Simona has not been in. So IndyCar, we race on oval courses, street races, and road courses. Street races would be like downtown. We do downtown Long Beach, California. It would be like Monaco for Formula One. And then road courses are purpose-built racetracks. So like Silverstone, or for us, Road America, Laguna Seca, those kinds of places. But Simona, last year we did the Indy 500, which of course is a big oval, a super speedway oval. But she hasn't been in a road or street course in 7 years. So when we were at Road America last weekend, that particular track, as an added layer of difficulty, that she hadn't been at that track in 14 years. And we were not able to get a test day prior to, just based a bit on logistics, a bit on the rule book, a bit on her schedule. We weren't able to get her a test day prior to our first race weekend. So she only had some days in the simulator, which is basically a very enhanced video game, for lack of a better, explanation, but very, as you can imagine, very accurate, but it's still just a simulator. It's not actually driving the car. And there's certain dynamics that you just cannot replicate in a simulator, that you really have to be in the car. So our first race weekend at Road America in June, she jumped in the car on Friday for an extended practice, that meaning the whole series had an extended practice. It just was dumb luck that it was a little bit of a longer practice session than normal. So I think instead of 45 minutes, it was 60, got 15 extra minutes. But to have not been in the car in 7 years was a big leap. So then what we were able to do was yesterday, rent Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the road course with a few other teams and have a day of practice and a day of just really testing getting her acclimated to the car, and then trying different setups with the car. So it really is a day for just really the driver and the engineers to just go back and forth. And, she'll go out for 10 laps, come back in and say, okay, what do you like? What didn't you like? And we're watching all of the data and seeing, we monitor as much as we can of the car, the telemetry on the car, and try to dial in the setup to something that she likes. Because, for instance, our team, we have 2 teammates, and each driver tends to like things a little different from each other. So, right. Yeah, we don't just take it off the shelf, but it's really that dialing it in to see what she likes. But part of the day was just her getting kind of back in the saddle, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, that was absolutely back.
Yeah.
I'm sure she's loving it as well.
Oh my gosh.
Excited to get racing again come the 1st of July.
Super excited. It's funny too, super excited. And because she was gone for 7 years, one thing that I keep reminding her, she's very hard on herself. She's like, frustrated that she's not getting it, faster. And the reality is she's getting it at lightning speed. And it is like riding a bicycle, right? In a lot of ways. But it is also, she's frustrated because there are things that she used to be very good at that she's just rusty about, right? So she's got to get back there. But the thing that is hitting her now is, because she was gone for 7 years, there are a lot of drivers that are in our series that have been here the whole time. And you see where they are in their career, and where, that they're reaching the podium every weekend. And you can see that she's frustrated, understandably, but we'll get there.
Yeah, because she wants to be up there with them, and she probably will, but
yes,
it's just her own frustrations. I
Patience.
get that. Yeah.
Yep.
I was doing a wee bit of research on you, Beth, and I was really interested to see that you studied broadcasting and film and business admin at university. So where did the love for autosport come from?
I've always loved it as a fan. And certainly if I look back now, I should have been a race engineer. I could have been a mechanic. I should have been a race engineer, but I didn't know that it was possible. And it's funny because even though I look back at how many years ago that was, I still have young women saying that to me now. In fact, I just interviewed a woman yesterday who is probably in her early 20s. And she said, she's like, I didn't realize until I saw your team last year that this is something I could do. And I appreciate that for, not to generalize, but I appreciate that for men, that might seem like a very ridiculous thing to hear. But part of that often has been culturally, genetically, whatever. Women sometimes, we definitely need to see ourselves in roles. If we see another woman do it, when we see a woman astronaut, we then think to go to space camp and learn to think that we could become an astronaut. And men have for centuries never really had that pause because they've always seen themselves. So it's not that you don't have it. It's that I think that's just worn down in you. And it's just like second nature. We still have that bit of hesitation. And then there's that other bit where we also want to feel invited. We want to feel welcomed and we want to feel included, that we're not, that it's going to be okay that we can be there. And it's a subtle little thing, but I think that we all have it. And for me, I never saw any women as engineers or race engineers, let alone race engineers or mechanics. And then the other thing that was very obvious is I didn't grow up in a racing family. So it wasn't something that my parents were showing to me as an example. But if you always hear engineers will always tell you, when I was a kid, I took everything apart and I would get a toy and I'd pull it apart. I did that, but my parents didn't necessarily, because neither of my parents were engineers. It wasn't their experience to see that in me and recognize that and say, oh, this is where we should kind of push her along. And for instance, I remember in, as we say, math class, not maths class, but in math class, as we say, it's singular in America. We learned one math. But in math class, I remember struggling a bit. And honestly, I can look back and know that I had a teacher that I didn't particularly care for or bond with. And so I struggled in her class. And I remember guidance counselors sort of brushing it off, that like, oh, that's okay. What is she going to need? What is she going to need that for? Instead of that, those are those moments where parents, it's not the kid, it would be the parents or the adult in that world to kind of swoop in and say, nope, let's get you some help. Let's get you a tutor. Let's get you up to speed with everybody else, because you don't know if this is something that you might need. Let's not just assume that you don't at 12 years old.
Yeah, exactly.
And in fairness, I think one of the things that I'm trying to do, you're going to see a lot of things over the next 5 years as we slowly roll out even with our race team. Our race team is very visible, and we know that. And hopefully it's seen as something that might get people interested in racing, but realistically, it's much broader than that. We don't need 1 million race engineers, but if this captures your imagination as a kid and gets you to pay attention to what cool things you could do with engineering or technical learning, and you might pivot and then go be an astronaut or go work for a car company or go work for Airbus. All of that is, or go build buildings. I mean, anything that might just capture your imagination to connect the classroom to a career is a win. So I was just a fan as a 5-year-old kid watching on television, and I always watched racing. And then as I got a little older, I begged my parents to bring me to the racetrack, and they did. And I was the kid that had Barbies and Matchbox cars. And they at least did indulge that for sure. They didn't dissuade the car thing. And then as I got older, I started reading car magazines and always watching racing, and took a circuitous path. I studied broadcasting and film because I wanted to make documentaries, because in high school I loved documentaries, and I thought, okay, I could do that. I love history. I love watching documentaries. Let me maybe learn how to go make them. And I in university studied that, and then had a part-time job where I worked in a outdoor sporting goods store. And I realized in that experience that I loved learning about business. So because in my undergraduate, there was no business learning. So I started to focus on business. And ironically, when I was in the alpine skiing, it was an alpine ski shop. I also then became very involved in the engineering and the technical side of the equipment. Again, no light bulbs going on of like, what, again, it's like still drawn to it. No, please. So I did that for a bit, but then decided to get a business degree and realized that what I love about business, and still to this day, I love solving problems. So weirdly, even though now I run the business of racing, it's because years ago I saw a business problem and I wanted to solve it. But it's that same, because what are usually engineers? Problem solvers. Identify a problem, solve a problem. Exactly. I'm doing that, but just in, with a calculator and like a counting calculator, not an actual calculator where I'm figuring out slopes and lines and things like that. And, no, not the rate that we're burning fuel. I'm figuring out the rate that we're burning money.
Your childhood sounds very, very similar to mine. I grew up in like a very small village, sort of out in the country, and I work in Belfast now, but I never would have heard of the likes of Bombardier, which, if somebody lived in Belfast, they would probably have that ingrained in them, to go to Bombardier to work. They would have been one of the biggest employers in Belfast. So I sort of just followed the route that a lot of my friends would have followed. My parents weren't overly, pushy in terms of education either. And then I was 27 actually whenever I heard about Bombardier, and I joined as an apprentice and then did my engineering. So I then became an aerospace engineer for them. But it was it was a well on in my career, but it's the same situation. You don't know what you don't know, and you don't know what's out there, and you really need to have that visual to be able to say, actually, hold on, I want to do that. So I agree 100% with what you said. A really inspirational story.
And I think too, parents, and I think we're getting better about this, about lifting the lid on what does engineering, I would say respectfully, engineering could do with a bit of marketing, because it's such a broad term that a lot of people hear the word, they don't know that there's how many different types of engineering, that there's mechanical, electrical, materials, industrial, organizational. I mean, all of these different things that technically fall under this banner of engineering. And I think we're hopefully as a society doing a better job of lifting the lid on what do you do all day though? What does that mean? And I think that most parents or caregivers, obviously everybody wants the very best for their child, but you have a lot of families where you might have a single parent who doesn't necessarily have a career. He or she may work 2 jobs. And that parent may not know or feel like they can foster the interest in their own child or their own kids. And they may, be curious as a parent of how, you can get to that point of like, I can't help my child with their math homework or their physics homework, but they want to make sure that they have that safety net for their child, but they don't know exactly where does that safety net exist. And I think that's the second prong of although we're talking and lifting the lid, I think that the next line of defense is to make sure that parents feel like they're supported in being a supportive nurturer. What does that look like?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that is happening here in Northern Ireland as well, with the launch of some new courses by the universities, Queen's in particular, that we're associated with. They are launching courses that are free for people to do because there is going to be a shortage of engineers coming through the system. So they are starting to recognize that here anyway, which is great. You're lucky. Hopefully we will catch on. Yeah, absolutely. So absolutely pleasure speaking to you. I'll pass you on to Shauna, and she has an interesting question for you.
Okay. Well, actually, just kind of what you were saying, Beth, and yourself, Kelly, about having that representation and being seen and becoming that role model. I think that's as well as what kind of attracted me to your company, Paretta Autosport, because we we at Vickerstock, we're very involved with kind of motorsport within Northern Ireland for the students, because Warren will probably go into a lot more detail on this, but we sponsor the Queen's Formula Student Racing Team, and we have done so the last 4 years. And God, they're an amazing bunch of students, so talented, so skillful. And I'm in obviously the marketing side of Vickerstock, and we were chatting with the guys in the team, and I think it was this day last year on Women in Engineering Day, I had a chat with the girls, and your name was brought up as, I think the question was, you know, who's your role model? Who's your role model in the industry? And Holly, who was one of the students, had mentioned your name, and she had said, Beth Paretta, she is an inspiration for women in motorsport. She's led the pathway to, you know, females within the industry. So again, that's me kind of going back on how important it is to have that representation. And, you know, 3,000 miles away, you're being seen by students in Belfast. So it is incredible.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah. So, you know,
it's
and
crazy.
then, yeah, so you guys are doing great things. And then I suppose then that kind of goes on to my question of the marketing side of things, because, you know, you got to market this out, and, you know, having looked on your website and your social media, the pictures are brilliant. They're so, like, they tell a story. And then just kind of seeing the news recently that you were appointed the Global Marketing Delegate for FIA, which again is the governing body of motorsport. So that's incredible. So I would
for the Women in Motorsport Commission, not the whole FIA.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Well, sorry. Commission.
I mean, you know, maybe someday.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'd love to hear more about that, because with my interest in marketing, I love to know, like, what that involves, what the future holds in that kind of commission. And
yeah, it's a new role for me. The appointment came through the request was in March, and such an honor to even, it's that same sort of thing. Like when you had your event last year, you know, you're just toiling away at your job. You don't know that people necessarily are seeing it. You don't know that people have heard your name. And there's still that weird, like, moment of pause that I have, and I hope I never lose, because it still is amazing to me that, because again, I didn't grow up in a racing family. In no way was this a preordained, you know, that this was what I was going to do for a living. And I you know, and I had a career change, right? So I came to this later. You know, I had a career, and then I pivoted, and then I had this career in automotive, and now I've had this career in motorsport. So I think what the reason for the appointment, and I think what's exciting about it, is the FIA, governing body globally of all of motorsport, created, I don't know how many years, maybe 10 years ago now, a Women in Motorsport Commission. And the intention is to help with identifying different women's programs around the world. I will say that, and we've made a lot of progress in North America, only probably like a lot of progress in the past 2 years. There's sort of been this slow, steady, but like now it feels like we're getting momentum. And I have some theories, but of why we're finally getting there. I think it's just that, like, if we're just all pushing the boulder, like it's just finally getting like up over the hill, which is why you're seeing more of it. But there's just been people toiling away for years and years. But the Women in Motorsport Commission now has a new new president, and her name is Deborah Mayer, and she's from Switzerland, actually. And I think she was born in France, but she lives in Switzerland, and she owns a race team, a sports car racing team in the World Endurance Challenge Championship. Her team, Iron Dames, just raced in Le Mans, I think for the second or third time. And she became the president of the FIA Women in Motorsport Commission in January of this year. And what was really exciting is when she looked to appoint the delegates, because there's a new cabinet, new president, new cabinet. One thing that was really great, selfishly, is there are 2 people on the committee now, on the commission, who are from North America. And we hadn't really been very much represented in this global body. And it's exciting for us to be included, because obviously North America is a very big market. And within North America, of course, very big, but we also often race globally. I've run programs that have raced internationally. So, as well as working for car companies that are clearly global and international. So we tend to have, some of us have tend to have a broader understanding or broader appreciation for the fact that we can all share learnings from different places around the world, and that there's value in that, even for very small markets, that they can learn from big markets, and respectfully, big markets can also learn from small markets. So there are many different seats on this commission, and they have area delegates. So there will be somebody from Northern Ireland, there'll be somebody from, I believe, I don't know if every European nation, but there'll be regions like East and West, and then Africa, North and South, and just in different Middle East, there's US, Canada, Central America, but every region is sort of broken down and has a delegate. And then there are the business disciplines that have delegates: marketing, engineering, manufacture, series, safety. I realize when I do that, my hands go missing. But we've only had one global meeting so far. So I got the request, was humbled to receive it, immediately said yes. And so as a marketing delegate, basically, we haven't had a meeting in person yet, but we intend to. Obviously, with COVID, everything has switched to virtual, but we will hopefully get back to in-person meetings again, where we present what's going on in our markets, listen to some of the challenges in other markets, and then offer advice, best practices, share those kinds of ideas. Now, with that said, the other thing that we're very proud of in North America, with a woman named Lynn St. James, who is a racing driver. She raced in the Indy 500, I believe, 7 times. What's amazing, and I could say this now because she's older, but the thing that's amazing is I learned this little tidbit. I've known Lynn St. James for years. Her first Indy 500 that she drove. So the reason that all of you, that some of the people have heard my name, is because we were in the Indy 500 last year, right? It's the largest single day sporting event in the world.
Amazing.
That's exactly why I put our team in it. So when you talk about the marketing side of what we're doing, like, those are very deliberate choices that when we were crafting the team, I left Fiat Chrysler. I used to work at Fiat Chrysler. I ran the marketing and operations of the performance division of Fiat Chrysler, which is called SRT. It's now been absorbed back underneath the Dodge brand, but at the time it was multi-branded. It was Jeep, Dodge, Chrysler. We launched the last generation of Viper, if you're familiar with that, the Gen 5 Viper. So I was there for the launch of that. I also launched a thing called the Hellcat, which is a very ridiculous Dodge Challenger SRT with this 740 horsepower ridiculous V8. It's funny.
You'd love that.
I mean,
I was just thinking that Warren is all ears.
Right. To this day, do you have them in Ireland? The Hellcat, your neighbors will thank you. To this day, when one goes by, and they're very loud. And when they go by, I mean, every time I just say, I blame myself. I have nobody to blame. I was part of that. This is our legacy. Like,
you gotta make noise. You gotta make noise. I love it.
Terrible. And what's funny is the funnier bit is, prior to my going to Fiat Chrysler and working with that brand, I used to work for Aston Martin. So you want to talk about a pivot? But the point is to be flexible. So, but in the role with Fiat Chrysler and SRT, so I had this wonderful experience of this global car brand, in addition to running these global racing programs. And I think that one of the things that's nice with this FIA affiliation now is, hopefully I can take some of that and wind up sharing it with these different markets and learn from them too. And but I will say that being very deliberate with what we did with Paretta Autosport and being in the Indy 500 was very much to be visible. As daunting a task that was, though, because to also put it in perspective, now I was partnered with Team Penske last year, a prolific race team owner, Roger Penske, who now owns the IndyCar series. And this year and at the end of last year, because of logistics, we were no longer able to work with them in 2022. We knew well in advance because they're now actually working on a Porsche LMDH program, building a new race car. Actually, they're building 4, 2 that will race in Europe, 2 that will race in the US. But I now have a new partner team that we're working with. But we were very specific about wanting to be in the Indy 500 last year, because with the launch of this team being primarily women, And again, the origin of that team is here I was working for a car company, seeing how car companies use racing and knowing that there were a few women scattered about, but knowing that these women were kind of toiling behind the scenes, and that, to your point about recruitment, car companies were lamenting the fact that there was a shortage of talent, regardless of gender. And there was this idea of, okay, we're going to have a crisis here of a lack of employees, people retiring at a faster rate that they're being hired. And that was going to get to a crisis point I knew for Fiat Chrysler was facing that. I knew General Motors, because being based in Detroit, we say the big three car companies, we kind of all know what's going on with the other major car companies, because we all kind of have similar challenges, as you would expect. And so we're seeing that we're heading for this cliff. We're going to drop, fall off this cliff of this this shortage of engineering talent. And so the idea was, well, we need to do something about it. And to your point about now having university classes, it was that same thing of, well, we as these different these companies that need the talent, what are we going to do? And it used to be that if you were to go to any major company and say, I think you should invest in a program for young people, for 12-year-olds, for high school age, for 15-year-olds, a company would have a hard time doing that, because it was hard to justify spending money on programs where maybe they'd see the payoff in 10 to 15 years. That was a hard thing to justify. The ROI it was too long tail, the ROI. But interestingly, because it got to that crisis point where everybody could just do the math and see, oh goodness, not only is there a shortage of talent, we are going to have a shortage of talent for several years that's going to impact us now exponentially. We have to do something. And that now has, at least in North America, has gotten us to be able to have these conversations about youth programs. Interestingly, so having that knowledge, okay, that started my team, but now with being involved with the FIA, those are those conversations that we can now have on a global scale, because now we're hopefully in the same room and we could say, hey, Middle East delegates, what's going on, where you are? Okay, this is a problem. We solve this problem this way, or very much the other direction too. How have you solved this problem? So we look forward to seeing what's going to happen in the coming years. And then in North America specifically, and this is something that the FIA has been very excited to learn about what we've done in North America. I mentioned Lynn St. James. So she's an ex-racing driver, and she was in the Indy 500. Is kind of what put her on the map, and again elevated her profile. And then from then on, she then has always worked in finding young racing drivers. She and I joined up last year and created Women in Motorsport North America, and that's just meant to be an information source, a portal, literally a website, a robust website to help women, either young women or women already in motorsport, to advance their careers, find jobs, find training, find schools, find mentors, all of this sort of things that can help you throughout your career. But we created this program, the FIA saw it and said, oh my goodness, this is a fantastic template. Could we copy this around rest of world? And we said, please do. I mean, why reinvent the wheel? We've been toiling away and it's not perfect, but at least it's kind of up and running. And please, use this template, use this blueprint, and see how you could use it in these other regions, and take a page out of our book. And then please, as you improve it, give us your secrets too, and hopefully we're all better for it. But the last thing I was going to say, I was joking about Lynn and her age, but the reality is it also shows you the magic of the Indy 500. You can kind of not come out of nowhere, but sort of come out of nowhere, and especially at that time, become a bit of a household name. She did the Indy 500 7 times. The first year she did it, she was 45 years old. The last year she did it, driving as the driver, she was 45. The last year she did it, she was 53.
Amazing. Fair play.
Wow.
So Kelly, I'm saying
I love that.
you and I pretty soon,
I use tell me, that's amazing.
I know.
Isn't
I'm
that
gonna get
shocking?
started now. I'll go next year.
Right? Isn't that shocking? To be 45 years old. And I mean, you're going 200 now, we're going 230 miles an hour, but at the time, 200 miles an hour.
It's impressive.
Yeah. It's not about driving a car, is it really? It's a very physically impacting,
strong mentally too.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. What's amazing is, so we used to call it the month of May, because quite literally the race is the end of the last Sunday of May. But it used to be quite it was about 4 weeks. Now we've shortened it to 2 weeks, because we have a race in the middle of the month. But the reason it's so long, or the reason we're there so many days, we have so many practice days, is because the drivers have to acclimate their brains. They go, so, because you're going so fast, and we literally have this reorientation. If you've been away from it, you have to be reoriented. If you are a rookie, you have to go through the rookie practices, where literally you go out and you're at 170 miles an hour, and then 180 for 10 laps, and then 190, and then we bring you up, and then we bring you back down again, and they do it over and over, because your brain has to recalibrate.
100%.
You always hear them say about, like, oh, everything slows down. It does, but you have to build up to that. If you just dropped in a car and went 230 miles an hour, it'd feel like 230 miles an hour.
Yeah, I can barely go 80 miles an hour in a car. Never mind. I'd be like, wah!
Right. So it's very pragmatic, but it's amazing when you see the people. And the thing that's amazing about the Indy 500, why we all sort of love it, and if you've seen it on TV, it's impressive. It can be interesting. If you ever have the opportunity to come see it in person, anyone should do it. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and it's funny, and you probably hear people they're all evangelists about it once they've been, and it might seem ridiculous that we all say this, but once you see it, and especially if you see it twice, because the first time you're almost so overwhelmed, and then you leave, and then you're kind of like catch up and realize what you see, and then the next time you go, it's even like, oh my gosh, it's bigger than it looks on television. The actual facility, I was there yesterday, right? There aren't any fans there. It has an energy to it when it's empty. I mean, it's a remarkable place. And, we've been racing there. Last year was the 110th anniversary of the first race. It started in 1911. And the stories and the history and women were not allowed into the garage area until 1971.
Wow.
And what's amazing about that is the first women who were journalists, because they argued, like, I'm covering these stories, right? And so they were allowed in. Our team last year, which was majority women, was the first time in history, in Indianapolis history, that there was a team of majority women. It was 110 years that it took to do that. And women weren't allowed in since until 1971. If you think about it, that was 50 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure, like, when they first let the first women in, I'm sure there were people, in fact, there's some that are still around, that were probably like, oh, this is a slippery slope, letting the ladies in. Now what's next? A team? And it was 50 more years. So we got to wait.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's definitely a reason to celebrate there.
Yeah. Oh, it's incredible.
Beth, I suppose I had a question for you as well. Shauna sort of dabbled with it there a second ago. We partnered with Queens.
Yes.
To help them develop it's a racing cart, if you like.
Yes. So
suppose most of the students, much like myself, have a massive passion for engineering. I love my cars. I love my autosports. I love it. It's a hobby of mine. So suppose what I'm asking is, what advice would you give to somebody that leaves university, goes across the likes of England to the likes of Lotus, to Jaguar, to Aston Martin, to Red Bull Racing? They come back, potentially finish their studies, maybe do a master's degree. What's the best way for them to get back into that, to work in the likes of Formula One or another type of motorsports?
Well, let me ask you this, Warren. It's your passion. Why isn't it your career?
Because is my boss going to listen to this?
He loves recruitment too much.
I'm going to give you an answer, and then I'm going to take the recording off and answer again.
That's fair.
We can edit this. We can edit it, Warren.
Oh, we can edit this, can we?
Shauna can cut some bits out.
To be honest, Beth, I don't think I would never leave recruitment. I love dealing with people.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I really do. I love my job. I love what I do. I love who I work with.
Yeah.
And that's definitely the truth.
Okay, that's fair. But in fairness too, like, I'm sure, like, when you're 18 years old, 20 years old, you might not have necessarily even known that yet. Now you know it and appreciate it because you're in it. Because I was curious if you had, like, that same sort of thing. Like, I didn't think of it as a job, because the thing that is interesting is, because in theory, what we do looks like it's fun, and it looks like because I mean, it's a sport, and sport is, I'll be honest, I didn't even make that connection. Again, it might sound ridiculous. I didn't even think of, like, sports business as a thing. Now there are universities that have sports business degrees, and of course it's a thing, and of course it's big business. But I would say, so if you want to be an engineer in racing, there are a lot of people that will come out of engineering programs, out of school, and get entry-level jobs with teams. And you can do that by just, looking at jobs boards and applying, and ideally interviewing well, maybe knowing somebody that works there, like that age-old stuff. The way to actually probably be very good at it, though, is even when you're in university, on weekends, if you have a track near you, or junior teams or amateur teams, just work on a team. Get a job working on a team, turning wrenches, doing anything. Most of us will have stories of, and it's working for very little money. That's why if you can do it on the side, I understand that not everybody can afford to do that. So sometimes just even an entry-level job with a team doing the unglamorous stuff is still worthwhile. Because you're then around it, you start to learn it, you start to meet people, and you start to network. Better than anybody that having a personal network is something that you have for your whole life, and you're really only as good as your network, and only as good as the people you know. And I'm certainly always fond of saying, people can get discouraged by that, like, oh, it's all who you know. Hang on, you don't necessarily remember who you know. Everybody has a network. Your dentist, there's all these people that you know. And so when you have an intention that, like, you'd like to work for a race team, start saying it out loud, not incessantly so and becoming terrible at cocktail parties, but in conversation. It's something great to mention, because you might mention it in front of your dentist. Hey, when they say, what are you up to? Oh, well, I'm trying to find an internship, like that sort of stuff, where then, when you're sitting next to somebody on a plane, it then, again, you have to balance it so it's not incessant, but everyone knows somebody. And that's how you start to build that network. And it might seem very simple or oversimplified, but it really, things can happen that way. First of all, so the building of the network, no matter what, and even if your ambition is to be an F1 engineer, or you want to be Christian Horner, you start now. And the other thing I would say is to work for any race team, work for an amateur race team, doing anything, being a gopher. Because all jobs are experience. It starts to get you to understand the cadence of a race weekend. What is, and then also learn your way around a car. And I wouldn't be afraid to learning to be a mechanic, because if you want to be an engineer, you're going to be a better engineer if you know how to be a mechanic. There are a lot of engineers who come out of school and go directly to work for either car companies or race teams and have no actual idea what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And we see you. But I mean, it's solvable. Just get in there, get your hands dirty, right?
At this point, within that division of Queen's, then the mechanical engineering department and their workshop, they've got an array of talent there. So somebody is working on the gearbox, somebody's working on the new drivetrain, which they're now actually going EV. Somebody's sourcing and trying to get the tires. Somebody's trying to sort out work with sponsors, the bodywork, the chassis, steering rack. So it's,
that
for
is
such a young group of people,
experience. That's
absolutely,
perfect.
Absolutely. They're over in Silverstone 3 weeks from now, Shauna, I believe. So myself, Shauna, and Darren, our boss, we're gonna go over here in 3 weeks' time, and
we get to go over and see it race. I'm so excited.
That's
yeah,
great.
it's in Silverstone, so it's good for the experience for them as well. But this is their first time with the EV. Before they had an internal combustion engine, so I think they're slightly nervous but excited at the same time. So they really are an exceptional group of talented individuals who will go far. Most of them actually do end up with the likes of Red Bull and Aston Martin and Mercedes for 12, 18 months, and then relocate back to Northern Ireland. So it is great to be a part of it.
Does the school have something formalized to help them get those internships, or are they sort of on their own? I mean, like anything, once you have one or two students go, it tends to open the door, because especially if they know that good talent has come and they're.
I think with Queen's, especially within engineering, it's one of the top universities, and probably in Northern Europe.
Yep.
Maybe one of the top 2 or 3 in the UK anyway.
Yeah.
So there is always a pull from those massive engineering companies, like I say, who do specialize in autosports. Even ZF, who a lot of gearboxes across in England, they do have a pull from, as soon as Queen's is on their CV or their record achievement, then it already gets them brownie points, if you like. So I think they've already got one foot in the door when they do go to Queen's University.
We have certain universities here that are the same, and I certainly we've heard of it here, so we know that it's It definitely has cachet in North America. The thing too that I think it's funny. Well, so we have this thing going on in North America, which is kind of funny. We call it the Drive to Survive effect. There's this Netflix show. And I will say it's funny because I still have not seen it, which everyone's like, what? On my time off, I don't really want to watch a documentary about what I do for a living.
Well, I don't even know. Our American Netflix and UK Netflix is different, isn't it?
Yeah, we've got it here. Drive to Survive.
Oh.
We've got it here. Yeah.
Have we?
So
I'm gonna watch it.
it's about F1, right?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
and I keep promising I will watch it. I promise I will watch it. I just haven't yet because, on my time off, I like to watch things that are not what I do, right? So, and what's funny though in the US is the US for years, on average, we're not F1 watchers. We're not. I am, and it's funny because growing up, I always watched F1, and I had certain friends that would, and so like we'd all know that we'd watch F1, and so of course we'd talk about the race on Monday, and all of the things that you do when you have like a small little niche group that happens to have a shared passion. But Drive to Survive hit during the pandemic, and so Americans have now discovered Formula One, which is hilarious in a lot of ways, because even last year when I went to the race in Austin, now last year's Austin F1 race, it was the 10th, and like it'd been going on for 10 years. It started in, because it started in 2012. I was at the first COTA race. I've been to COTA for F1 a few times. I've been at F1 races around the world, several, whatever. But on the Thursday, I'm going to fly down to Texas from Detroit, and I get to the airport, and at the gate, people are wearing all their F1 gear at the gate. And I'm like, oh God, oh no, it's happened. Like Americans have discovered Formula One, because I could just tell by the way they were standing, like those aren't normal F1 fans. And then like I hear them overhear them at the gate chatting like, oh, you're going to the race? Like, yeah, of course they're going to the race. They're flying to Austin. They're wearing the kit. And they're like, oh yeah, it's my first race. It's my first race. And I'm just sitting there watching it like, you don't say, of course, right? And so on the Friday, normally what was great about watching an F1 race in the US, as to quote a dear friend of mine, what was great is there was always ample parking because nobody was there. So on the Friday, like practice day, I remember like cresting the hill to get to Circuit of the Americas, and just the line of traffic. And it was that moment of like, no, like you all with Netflix, you all like found it. Oh. Which of course we're laughing at and teasing each other about, like all of us diehard fans, but of course we're grateful for it, because if it doesn't have fans, it doesn't, like, it's great for the health of it. It's great for the sport. It's fantastic. Like, be careful what you wish for. Like my whole life, it's like, I just wish people would watch F1, and now they are. But with that said, the amount of resumes that I get now, and it's a lot, and a lot of young women, and they're like, I want to work in F1. I'm like, do you though? Because I understand that in theory, everybody, like, it's like, oh, it's the pinnacle. It's the pinnacle. Sure. Great. There are a lot of different types of racing around the world that are fantastic, that have completely different rule sets, that have completely different politics. Like, those of us that love IndyCar, we love IndyCar. I also love sports car. I also love, there are people that love NASCAR, and NASCAR is its own thing. And I will say, anyone who's a proper racer and anyone who's a racing driver, we all respect every discipline. We all literally will watch, on that last Sunday in May in the morning, we watch Monaco. Depending on where you are, you're either at Monaco and then you watch the next two races, or you watch Monaco, you race Indy 500, and then you watch Charlotte NASCAR race, or you're in Charlotte and you watch the first two. I've done all of those things. And proper racers appreciate all and watch all. But this idea that F1 is the thing that I'm working toward is kind of funny for all of us, because there's so much more out there. But I get it, because it's visible, and they like to remind you that it's the pinnacle and this and that. But like, I'm sorry, winning Le Mans isn't easy either. And I wish that people would have that dream too, as an 8-year-old, and say, I want to win Le Mans because that's a thing, or I want to win the Indy 500 because that's a thing. But Drive to Survive now is not doing any Americans any favors right now, because that right now is the only racing that I think a lot of them have come to learn. And like, you should see these resumes. They're like, yeah, I don't have any experience, but this is what I want to do. I'm like, you were watching a TV show. Like, what if you were watching Below Deck? Do you now just want to work on a boat and serve people food?
Yeah, we get that all the time.
Right.
We know
Why are
exactly
you
what you mean.
Right. Why don't you want to be Tiger King?
Yeah,
That was a thing. Are a lot of people applying to zoos? So
Talking about the resumes, Beth. I guess touching back on that point in terms of the types of experiences you look for, education and experience, but obviously mechanical, electrical. I guess technology is playing a bigger part. What are
yeah,
the kind
data
of
science.
you're
Honestly,
taking as an example?
yeah,
What
data
was
science
interesting?
is very important because so there's always a position on a race team called a data acquisition engineer. And we call it a DAG because it was always data acquisition guy or gal. But it's really a data engineer. And so information science, management information systems, anything that helps you aggregate information. I mean, a lot of teams are starting to dabble into seeing how they can use AI and machine learning. It's funny, there's always this thing that happens, it often happens in racing where there'll be new technology and it's kind of the Wild West of that new technology. And so they'll try to start to use things until the rule book catches up and be like, wait a second, you can't use that. So there's always this push-pull. But now, same thing with that data science, right? So it's interesting to get that degree and get that study, but anytime you can also understand the data that you're collecting and what it means, right? There's a difference between looking at spreadsheets and then really being able to analyze it.
Analyzing it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But I'd say, I mean, what you look for on any resume is, and you don't have to have racing experience. So that's, I kid about like the people that have zero but it's because they were watching a document or watching a unscripted series. I always say that the actual tasks can be taught. So if you have an interest, the number one thing, especially for this, in fact, we were talking about this yesterday with this new candidate we were interviewing. I will say, and this should never be minimized. The thing about racing, you have to be passionate about it. It is a grueling schedule. It is not glamorous. I mean, we work every weekend. And we work during the week. There were times when I was at Fiat Chrysler because I was running a division, I was running this performance division and running the racing programs. The racing was about 30% of my job. The rest was, or maybe 35. This is 65. The racing was a little bit more visible, but most people didn't know that, oh no, this was actually my main job. And there were times, and I have colleagues, one of my all of the other car company people, we all kind of know each other, same thing. Like those are your colleagues, right? Because you're usually waiting in the rental car line together at whatever, and so you see each other everywhere, and you commiserate on just the type of workload that you have. But race teams and what I did, you're working on the weekends, but then you're in the shop or you're in the office during the week, and it's very difficult. Is it difficult on families and relationships? Yes, it is. We're not going to sugarcoat that. We can't, because if I do, and I hire you and you work 2 years and then you're miserable and then you leave, you've wasted your time. You've wasted our time. You have to be brutally honest about it. And same thing, you look at Formula One, like, oh, it's glamorous. They're flying all over the world. Do you know how grueling it is to fly all over the world? It's not easy.
No.
And right. It's not easy. And I get it. And now granted, this isn't meant to be like a sob story either, because obviously we do it because we love it.
Yeah.
And none of us would trade it. And any of us who've worked in racing and then leave, we all come back because you can't help it. It is a family. We all know each other. We all look after each other. It is the closest thing to running away and joining the circus. This is it.
It's a community in itself, really, isn't it?
It's
Yeah,
absolutely a community, because it's such a strange thing. And let's be honest, what we're doing can be dangerous for both the driver and the crew going over the wall. I mean, there is an element of danger. We're all aware of it. When those things happen, we all take care of each other. We all look after each other. And I think that's something that bonds us as well. But if you're looking to get into it, now, granted, there are jobs that are 9 to 5 in racing in theory. There are jobs that are shop based. But if you think that you want to be working with a traveling race team, it is not for the faint of heart. So what we look for is somebody that is absolutely passionate about it, somebody that has just the aptitude to learn and the interest. It's not so much about where you worked. In fairness, sometimes hiring somebody with less experience or somebody that's green is easier to teach. I don't have to unteach you. a bad habit that you might have had somewhere else. Like the women that we had on our team last year that that were our crew that went over the wall, none of them had ever worked in IndyCar. None of them had ever been to an IndyCar race ever. Some of them had no motorsport experience. We hired them because they were athletic, because we needed to teach them how to go over the wall and change tires. An IndyCar pit stop, because we actually do tires and fuel. So like in Formula One, they haven't done fuel now for 10 years, which is why their pit stops are so short. So kind of a misnomer. People are like, oh, their stops are so short because it's the pinnacle of racing. No, they're just changing tires. Like, so they're not doing a lot of things. So that's why it's 2 seconds or 3 seconds. But yet the car comes in, there's this sort of sea of humanity that covers the car, and then the car drives away and you don't see a thing. IndyCar, we're only allowed 7 people over the wall. So the pit stop is 7 people max, right? So you can see the car, and we refuel, and we take a tear off the windshield, and we might adjust a wing, and we change the tires. And we do that in 6 seconds. Which is also really fast. And the reason it's 6 seconds, I mean, we can do longer than that if we're not doing it well, but the reason 6 seconds is the constraint is it takes 6.2 seconds to fill the car, to fuel the tank. You know, the fuel flow rate is regulated. So it's 6.2 seconds to fill the tank fully. So that is the constraint. So I need to change the tires faster than that. So if we if we can do it in 5.3 seconds and that team can do it in 5.2, doesn't matter. We're still waiting for the fuel. But the women that we trained up last year had never been to an IndyCar race. They had never touched an IndyCar before. The first time they were ever at Indianapolis Motor Speedway was at a test day that we had in April. So they walk in for the first time, and you realize like how amazing that is, because the first time that they were experiencing it, they were part of a team. It's weird, crazy. But the thing that's amazing about all of that is it proved that you can teach somebody if the interest was there, and the aptitude and the willingness to learn, and the support and the tools. Give them the right tools, give them the support and the coaching, let alone then the subjective stuff of the encouragement and the confidence and the protection and all of those things, because we obviously had a lot of added scrutiny. So all of the women who we hired, you know, that's the added layer of saying, okay, this is public, people are going to be looking at you. You know, are you okay with that? And you know, it's going to be a little bit daunting, you know, because there's people, we were a curiosity, there were people staring at us. But the coolest thing is, come race day, when they then did a pit stop in less than 5 seconds, you can't fake that. So you prove that you can do it. And so I think it's also a good life lesson that if you can hire the right people, you can do amazing things, but it's not, and it's not necessarily where you went to college, because I don't know if you have the same problem. We have some here, a bit here with some of our Ivy League schools. We have a serious legacy problem where you may go there because your father or your mother or your grandparents went there. And so you automatically kind of get into that school, but it doesn't mean that you're a good student when you're there. So,
Yeah.
you know, and
that over here to an extent, not so much, but definitely to an extent.
Yeah. And genius lurks in strange places. I mean, it's, and your job, what you guys do is to kind of tease it out and find where that little where that magic is. But I think, passion and interest probably will carry the day further than just having strong grades, especially doing this.
Good.
Very good. That's amazing, by the way. 6 seconds. Incredible.
Yeah. If you go back and watch it, it's crazy. So, and to put it in perspective, when we hired them February 1st, this crew. And so they're at the shop, and we have a pit area set up. Like, so it's the same, you know, the wall is the right height, and, you know, cause they practice it, it's choreographed. When they did their first pit stop on a static car, it was 18 seconds.
Wow.
So they learned how to do it, how to use the air gun, how to do this, how to do that. And then they do it, and it's videotaped, and they watch it back, and they do it over and over and over again. And remember, so then once that's just on the static car, then we introduce a car that's then rolling in. And then they do it over and over again. And then we introduce what we say a live car, like a car that's running outdoors. And because now you're introducing the sound of it, the smell of it, a driver in it, because sometimes it doesn't stop perfectly on the line.
A warmer engine.
A hot engine, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, the person that does the outside rear has to wait for the car to stop. And then, you know, then she's running around and then getting the gun on the wheel nut. And they were 18 seconds. They got down to less than 5.
Yeah, because we actually, Belfast had a kind of, I think to mark the start of Formula One, they had a Formula One car come to the city centre, and it was set up in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they had the section at the front where you could change a wheel, and
Yeah.
you use all the equipment to do it. And that is not easy to
No.
do. It is not easy to do. And it's, never mind trying to do it fast, it's so fumbly, and it's so, when you see that being done at such a high speed, there's high level of skill and respect
Right.
there for sure. It's amazing.
Accuracy, consistency. And then the thing to put in perspective too, like for the changing of the tires, whether it be Formula One or IndyCar, sports cars a little slower because sports car, usually you have a driver change. So that their pit stop can be like, it literally can be like 20 seconds. It's a much different sport, but much different rule set. But when you're changing tires, you're kneeling down. So you don't, your center of gravity, right? And you're pulling off a wheel with one arm and putting it on with the other. So you also have to be ambidextrous in your strength. And our wheels are like 35 pounds. So when you're kneeling like that, and it's a lot of weight. And you should see one of our tire changers from last year. She's probably like 5'2". She might be 120 pounds. It's shocking.
Tiny.
Yes.
I guess it is. It just shows you that if you are determined and you want to do something like that, there definitely is a possibility for you. And more of our clients and companies that we're working with now are definitely asking for that type of person that you would explain, the passion, the drive, the motivation, the willing to learn. So it definitely is something that, I think is across the board now at the moment. It's not just about your education. It's not about your skill set and your experience, which is a great thing.
I think it's, in the past, and I think of even in my career, people that took a chance on me and took, and the idea that I might've been a non-traditional candidate for different roles if you look at my career arc. And it's funny because if you know me, I was never a risky bet, but maybe on paper, if you don't know me, right? So it's that idea of being willing as an employer to take those chances and take those gambles. But I think there's so many stories, like you even hear of just see different biographies or things over the years. People will often talk about the time that they got their big break, and they might've been that non-traditional bet. And so maybe some of that is reminding those employers of those examples. And you can, again, the actual task can always be taught.
Yeah,
so.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, we've kept you for nearly over an hour because this has been such an absolutely brilliant and insightful chat. I could probably chat all day. So I know you're so busy, Beth, so we probably don't want to keep you. Have you got any races today, or are you traveling today?
Traveling home, and then a race next weekend, and then we'll also be racing the beginning of August on the streets of Nashville.
Amazing.
Wow, very good.
Amazing.
Yep.
Well, I suppose we kind of wanted to just end on sort of that question because, kind of coming into women in International Women in Engineering, which is always, but of course, yesterday was just a lovely day to kind of mark that. What would you say to kind of younger girls, say from any age, from the age five upwards, if they had a passion for engineering, what would you say to them?
I think that the first thing is never give up. Always keep pushing forward. Sometimes just being persistent is going to get you where you need to be. Be kind, and certainly in my industries I've worked in, the world is small. Ideally, seek out mentors as you get older, and ask for help when you need it. I think maybe we're not as quick to ask for help when we do need it, but as much as I encourage everybody to ask for help, I also encourage everybody to help others. Certainly when others ask you for help, be quick to assist, even with introducing people to others, and be supportive, because I think being a good human is probably the most important thing, and that will take you the furthest.
Absolutely. Brilliant way to end this great chat. And honestly, we thank you so much from all of us.
Thanks, Beth.
And the team at
Absolutely.
Bickerstaffe. And we wish you and your team all the success this season.
Thank you.
Yep, good luck.
Definitely will be following your journey.
Excellent. You can
For sure.
hopefully watch us. I think sometimes you can see this on Sky if you have that.
I've got
but you can
Sky.
see-
I've
Yeah,
got
yeah.
It's on Eurosport. I think it's on
Eurosport,
Eurosport.
Oh, it might be
India,
that.
yeah.
Yep. So you can watch our IndyCar races, and
Yeah, for sure.
You'll see Simona Di Silvestro at Mid-Ohio, Nashville, and possibly a race later this season as well.
Nice.
Amazing. Well, if
Very
you're
good.
ever in Northern Ireland, you know to give us a shout.
Absolutely.
I know
Absolutely.
the best place
I've
for
never-
Guinness, Beth, honestly.
There's just one.
Well, there's plenty.
Do you guys still, didn't you have like, is there like a DeLorean museum? Didn't they make the DeLorean in Belfast?
Yeah, I
that's
think
true,
they're actually
yeah.
going to remake that, Beth. There's
I
actually,
saw it, right?
yeah, there's
Yeah.
concepts for an EV version. But
So
I'm
who
not,
owns it though? Like who owns the rights or the
I honestly don't know. So no,
Oh.
it's a bit of a there's a story
touchy,
behind the whole thing.
yeah,
be
touchy
honest.
subject, I'm sure. But it's
Yeah.
funny, like it's worth, if people don't know the story, watching the documentaries about that, because it's kind of a fascinating
Yeah,
Yeah.
thing, a
definitely.
fascinating story.
It is. It is indeed.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Yep.
But no, it's good to see it coming back. It's an iconic car, you know, and hopefully it all comes to fruition.
Right. Back to the Future alone. Put that car.
Absolutely.
But yes,
Excellent.
thank you very much for your time.
Thank
anyway,
you,
Beth.
guys. I
Honestly,
really
genuinely,
appreciate
really appreciate that.
Appreciate
Best
that.
of
Thank
luck.
you so much, Beth.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Have a great
Thanks.
day.
All the
You
best.
too. Thanks.
Bye.
Cheers,
Bye.
Beth. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.